G'day, welcome to this episode. Today I'm going to try and figure out the problem of putting this body on this rotisserie. Alright, so following on from last episode where I introduced the shed, now it's time to actually get into some work again. And I've been talking about it for a while, but now it's time to actually get this body onto the rotisserie. So I've been umming and ahhing about how to do this, and I've come up with a couple of different methods and been juggling which one to go with for the final. As you can see behind me, I've hooked up the ceiling hoist, so I'm pretty sure that's capable of taking the body weight. I'm not going to do it all. What I'm going to do is do it in two stages. So I'm going to get one half. The beauty about this rotisserie is it splits up into two sections. So when you're not using it, you can stow it away. But the other beauty about it is that I can take half of it, which wheels independently, and I can use that to bolt onto the rear bumperettes, and that will allow me to then start using the 8-ton hydraulic jack to jack the back off the chassis to high enough point where it's going to clear the wheel well, so the wheels can roll out from underneath it. And then what I'll do is I'll attach the hoist to the front door bolt areas where the hinges go, and I'll then use a 400 kilo strap and winch the front up so it sort of cantilevers the back position, and hopefully that will allow me to then clear the wheels and then roll the chassis out underneath. And then I'm going to fashion up some kind of bracing so that I can, once I've jacked it up, I'll slide that under and then I can rest the body back down there, and then that will give me some room to work to then fashion up this the front rotisserie guards to attach to the body. So yeah, initially I was going to use the 60mm, make a bracing up. There's actually, on the body, from what I can see, there's 4 bolts at the front, 2 in the middle and 2 at the back. So that's, from my maths, 8 all up. I'm going to go directly to the body with the given braces that comes with the rotisserie. It's got a little drilled through hole there and a tapered tube which allows you to bolt straight up in replacement of where the chassis usually be to the body. And from there I might get a 5 or 6mm sheet of plate steel and then go on an angle to the other bolt on the front of the body. That will just create a little bit of tension in between the two, so that one bolt's not taking the whole weight on each side, because I don't know how it'll act when you turn it right around, considering it's only 2 bolts holding the whole thing. So I don't want to bend or pull out the bottom of the body at all. So anyway, I'm going to start by undoing all the bolts, see how rusted they are. Hopefully they're not welded to the chassis. And then, once the body's free, we'll start to fashion up the bracing. All right, so I've got all the bolts out of the body. There's all 8 of them there in varying states of disrepair. You can see that a couple have come out with the rubber stops on them, and a couple are in quite good condition, and then there's a few that are quite bad. So as you can see, some have come out without the rubber stops, and some still have the rubber stops on there, and then you've got that big thick washer that the bolt pushes up against, so it sort of sits up on top inside the chassis, and then you'll have a rubber mount on top of the other chassis, and then the body sits on it. So yeah, over time, I think there's a little steel core in this inside here. So some have stayed up there purely just through friction, and over time have stuck there, and some have come out. So obviously you're going to replace them all, but yeah, over time that steel core starts to wear away, as you can see here, prime example, and you start to get movement in that chassis mount, and that all adds up to, I suppose, having squeaks and rattles and bad ride and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's worth checking out your condition of your body mounts just to make sure that they're all tight and in good condition, because yeah, at least 3 were finger tight for me, and you can see there even the core's starting to get worn out eaten out by rust. So yeah, I'll be replacing these, no doubt. I'm sure Rare Spares or Kingswood Country sell a set. I'm pretty sure I've seen a set of body mounts. So while we're there, might as well replace them, and that way you know they're going to be fresh for a long time going forward. All right, so the arc welders arrived a couple of days ago, but I've sort of been sitting here looking at it and not using it. So finally got around to giving it a test run. But before I show you that, just give you a quick rundown of, for all those who don't know what an arc welder is. Basically, it's a more primitive style welder compared to a MIG welder. So this is your gun. It's just a simple sort of electrode trigger. And instead of wire, you get these little, I don't know what you call them, like sticks, which have got flux and everything around them. And so once you put that in the electrode, like so, that becomes the gun. And you don't need to push any triggers or anything. You literally just need to tap the metal to initiate the circuit, and then it starts to spark and weld. So definitely harder, not so much harder, but more, not as accurate and finessed as MIG welding. It's more sort of brute force, thick metal. You know, it doesn't need to be as clean as MIG. You can almost weld through rust and things like that. So it's more, so this is sort of handy for your farm, you know, outdoor gates, fences, you know, stuff where you just need to get it structurally sound and not necessarily looking great. So, and this is the earth, which is just Great Whack and Earth clamp. That's from Edison's again. Each time I say these prices, I always get them wrong, but I think it was around about $178 for that 200 amp inverter arc welder. And that's a 10 amp unit as well, so as you can see it's pretty tiny. And it's just got, it's basically a very primitive dial from 10 to 200 amps, and that's it. You know, the light to say you're on, and I guess a light to say when you're actually using it. So that's it. Comes in a case like this, and yeah, it was delivered in about 4 days. So I'm going to use Edison's for a lot of stuff. They're bloody good provider, and their stuff's pretty good quality. So anyway, this is my first attempt, which is pretty woeful. You can see this. I've just replicated what I'm going to do for the rotisserie. So I'm going to be, obviously that's going to be on the bumperette bit. I'm going to do that first. And then these tubes are going to be sliding onto the rotisserie like that. So I've really got to join this square tube to this flat plate. And as you can see, you know, shit house. But that was my very first attempt. Just everywhere. You can see that one's not too bad there. But all the others, I got severe undercutting, as they say, I think it is called here. It's terrible. So it's just running too hot and just burnt it through this steel here, which is only 4mm or something. So the other stuff's going to be a bit thicker. Although that would still hold, I wouldn't be, you know, placing my life on it, that's for sure. So come the final run, it's got to be a lot better quality than that. So the next run, I'm going to actually get another bit of tube here and just sort of maybe cut a little bevel just on the edges there, and stack another one on top, and then see how my beads go. As far as the welding rods are concerned, I've been using this basically two sizes that you can get with welding rods for arc welding, and one is 2.5 and the other is 3.2, I think. So I got the 2.5 width, being that it's probably, I was told it's a little bit easier to run a bead. Yeah, so I'm going to try and attempt to weld together these two square tube pieces now for another test run, and then once we're finished with that, I'm going to go to the real thing and start to assemble these brackets. Alright, so I've managed to weld those two brackets on and get the first piece onto the back of the ute. So yeah, they're my welds. The arc welding is definitely different. That's pretty ordinary there. It's a bit of
gunk, but in general they're pretty strong. I've run over them twice. That's probably one of my best ones there, and that's saying something. So I've tacked on those two sleeves and I've run the level over them. Pretty level. I'm getting much better with my arc welding now, so got some nice tacks going on there. One each corner. Haven't done that corner, but done the other corner. So the rotisserie arms were in there. Now I've taken them off. It's a wobbly old fucking thing, this thing. So I don't know if they're all like that, but I had to undo this because it was quite tight. So I'm going to bead weld the rest of it, and I'm hoping it doesn't warp the metal enough to get this rotisserie back on, and then hopefully the rear is done. So here we go. All right, so those are welded on. I'm pretty happy with the top weld. There's a few imperfections on that side weld, but I don't know, I think it's pretty strong. Underneath, I tried to weld it, but obviously because of gravity, it's very hard. So I'm not too sure. I might just try and get this on first, and then if I have to, I'll take the whole thing off and go over it again. But essentially that's on. It seems to be pretty level. I've got the held position. The horizontal level, it might be a different story. I'm not too sure how straight they're held up, but what I've done is I've put up some grease over these arms here on both sides, because they tend to grip with the paint, the fresh paint on the rotisserie arms. They were gripping quite badly. It took me a fair effort to get it off, so I'm a little bit concerned that it's going to be hard to get in, but I'll just give it a go. I'm sure I can manoeuvre it on. It's been on once, it should come on again. So yeah, once that's on, then I'll start playing around with winching it up and see what happens. So I've got this this rigged up. I don't know if that cable's going to be long enough. It's got to be quite a short distance here, because I'm really up against it as far as the angle's concerned. So, and the distance to clear the wheel well. So I've got to get it up around about a foot, which is a fair bloody way. That's about a foot there, but it'd be really hugging the roof, and because it's on an angle, it cuts out. This is it just feels feels precarious, the whole thing, but there's no other way to do it. So I've fashioned up these jigs here on each side, just off one. Now, I'm sure someone's going to have a go at me for doing that, but I've tested it, and it doesn't seem to be flexing the walls of that door at all, that door well. And so I've started jacking the back up as well here. So that's all in position, and start to jack it up. So it's pretty nerve-wracking. I'm pretty tense at the moment. So yeah, I just hope I'm doing the right thing and get this thing out. As soon as the chassis is out, I'll tell you what, I'll be able to sleep properly, because it's been doing my head in for a couple of weeks now. So anyway, I'll try and slowly get it up and see how we go.
Holy shit.
Well, we got it off. I called a mate over, Foxy, to the rescue, and he's doing a project at the moment actually. So he's had some experience with WB chassis, and I tell you what, I couldn't have done it without you, Foxy. So thanks a lot. But yeah, so we had a bit of an issue with at the start. I forgot that the fuel feeder hose is actually connected through the body. So if you ever try to winch it off, you got to remember that you have to disconnect the feeder hose down near the fuel tank before you start getting the body off. Otherwise, it'll grip. And what mine was doing was tilting the whole thing viciously to the right-hand side. And it was very precarious. So yeah, what happened then is because it was tilting, also jammed the jack arm, so I couldn't lower it again because it was on an angle. So you've got to sort of be quite accurate. So once you raise the rear of the vehicle, then you have to go and raise the front to match it. If it's out by a few inches, then the actual jack will be on a tilt and it won't lower if you need to lower it. So it can be quite dangerous. Also, these safety pins come in real handy. So just make sure that when you're doing it, you put that pin in just in case it does fail. It doesn't go too far, only a couple of inches or something. Did hear a couple of noises when we were doing the raising, and I was shitting myself. I thought, we're going to bring the whole thing down, but really, I think that that mezzanine level is more than capable of holding the front of that ute, and we had it suspended there for a good 20 minutes. It was fine. I think the noises were just cables and things like that underneath getting caught in the chassis as we were lifting the body off it. I don't think the clanging and the banging was from the hoist at all. So I think it's capable. I don't want to be underneath it when it's doing it, but yeah, look, it did the job and it did it well. And I would recommend getting one. If you've got the right supports for it, go ahead and do it. I did double it up, and once I'd fashion up these little gate post things hanging off the door frame, which was enough to get it off. And then once we could get underneath, in front of on top of the chassis, we put the strap underneath the body, and I doubled that hook up, so it was up to 800 kilos capacity, so it was more than enough to lift the front of it off. And it was more aligned, so yeah, it went straight up, no dramas at all. So really happy with it. Now I just have to fashion up the front of the rotisserie arms. So there's a couple of different ways I'm thinking about doing that. I'll probably keep it similar to the way it was at the back, and then that way it's just done. And here's the chassis. So yeah, it's a filthy bastard. See, all the oil from the transmission was just leaking onto that cross member there. It was probably a lot of engine oil as well. It's absolutely filthy. The chassis is in good nick though. There's no cracks. It's literally just dirty, and I won't be powder coating it. I reckon I'll just give it a good old gurney, wash it back, sand back anything that's gone back past the original powder coating. But honestly, I think with a good wash, I think it'll reveal most of the powder coating, as you can see there. It's pretty much intact still. It's just got some weathering, which a lot of that will come back once I start washing it and degreasing it. So yeah, this is it's really opened up a can of worms as far as what I'm going to do with suspension and things like that now. And now that I can see it all, I can start making some assessments as to what I want to do. I've been speaking to a couple of people up here in Central Victoria, and these guys up in Bendigo that do air ride kits, and I really would like to bag it, because that way I can just drop it down as far as I want to go, and roadworthy won't be an issue. When I go roadworthy, I'll just put it at ride height, and then that way I've got the ability to drop it on its guts if I want to. But we'll see. It just comes down to money at this stage. I know that airbag kit requires a different setup at the back end, a 4-pin setup or something like that, and that becomes expensive. The kit's itself is probably about $2,000, but everything else that goes with it, and you got to have stub axles and all this kind of stuff, and yeah, it gets expensive. So we'll see. We might just end up doing lowered leaf springs and a good solid lowered springs front and some gas shockers, and that'll do. Anyway, so next stage is to get the rotisserie onto this front, and then we'll spin the basket around. All right, so I've finally got rid of the heater box and the vents. Yeah, so I've tried to label everything as I go, but I'm going to get myself into trouble. There's no doubt about it with the loom and all the wiring that goes in there, because at the moment it's just dog's breakfast. So yeah, you can see it's all there. I mean, I've got no idea I've labelled most of the major ones, you know, heater 2, heater 1, so I can join them up at the labels on that side. But as far as all the other wiring is concerned, I mean, a lot of it's cracked and old and, you know, broken and things like that. So I'm going to really probably just start again and get an auto elect to just sort it out. I know it's probably going to be expensive at the end, but yeah, I can't be fucked trying to sort it out myself, and I just don't have the expertise. There's some things you just really can't do yourself. So I'm going to leave it, yeah, tucked under there for now. But I've got pretty much the whole firewalls now exposed and free of all grommets, rubbers, wires, cables. The only two things that really are left are these heater fans. Yeah, so I mean, I can take that out, or I can leave it. Probably take it out when I repair this cowl piece again. Yeah, so she's on stands. I've got the hoist cable there just in case something happens, so as a backup. Anyway, so I'm going to now attempt to put these two rotisserie arms on this piece of tubular steel, and then put that tubular steel underneath here and bolt them up, and then we can start to spin it and get back to work on this thing. All right, so I fabricated this front section for the rotisserie. This is a little bit more complicated than the rear section. As the two bolts on each side of the body actually have a taper to them, so you can't just run a bar straight across. Annoyingly, you've got to taper it down slightly the other way, so that's upside down. So what I've done is I've drilled out a 38mm hole so that I can get the socket wrench in there, and also the bolt has to butt up against this top layer and not so much the other one, because they're not long enough. And that's the way it works on the actual chassis. So you put this through, so basically it'll be sitting like this. Yeah, so this is the way it'll be sitting, and you can see you got the hole there. The bolt will fit up into there, and then I'll put this the way it was on the actual chassis. I'll put one of these stoppers here, and that will give me enough, that will eat up enough room for the bolt to bite into the thread and yeah, tighten up nicely. So yeah, that's the way I'm going to do it. I've had to do the angled iron here for both sides to fit those two bolts each side, and then obviously drill out all those 38mm holes. So it's, yeah, it was a bit of a job. Finally got it done, so now it's I'm going to do a test fit, and then I can start welding the arms on.